I'm excited today to talk with Maureen Cassidy. I've read about her for many years and followed her in her political career, and she now is working in nonprofits. And I'm looking forward to learning more about Maureen rather than what I've just read over the years. She is an inspiration to me, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have this opportunity. So welcome, Maureen. And I thought, because people will be like me, they don't know the real Maureen Cassidy.
Right.
I know that you're from Sarnia, and I know that you have a brother that lives here. But really, that's about all I know about you other than your political experience. So let's talk by you sharing about yourself, what your career path has been like as a woman leader, and then we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. So I ran for office in 2014 here in the city of London. I am originally from Sarnia. The Cassidys were a big name in Sarnia only because we were such a big family. So we didn't necessarily do special things or anything. It was all my mom that did all that work. So, and my brother there in Brights Grove. So went to Western here in London and left actually right after university, moved around for about 10 years and then came back. I was inspired to run for city council because at the time, you might remember, it was in the free press a lot, the tumultuous term of city council that happened between 2010 and 2014. And I think a lot of people in London were inspired to run during that election. I think there were more candidates than they had had in a long time. It was that there was a voting block. I think the big news came because there was a mayor that had been charged and convicted with fraud and breach of trust. So there was a lot going on. It was in the news a lot. And I think because of all of that, there was a higher voter turnout. Helen, that municipal level has the lowest voter turnout. And in the last election, it was abysmal in London. It was under 25%. You normally hovered around just under 40%. And then for the 2014 election, the turnout went up to about 43%. So there was a lot of interest in that election. And as I said, a lot of candidates. I was really lucky because I had Joni Beckler as my predecessor in the ward where I ran and my mentor and friend. And I met Joni because there was a planning issue that was going on in our neighborhood. And as is often the case, especially in suburban areas of London, the neighborhood was not pleased with the application that the developer had put forward. So a group of neighbors came together, and I originally really just started as an observer and listening to what was going on, listening to my neighbors' concerns. At some point, I ended up as the president of the newly founded Homeowners Association. And so I was really lucky because I worked really closely with Joni. Hindsight of having the benefit now of hindsight and my 2 terms on city council, I look back at that proposal that came forward that was in 2010, and I think, oh my goodness, like that was the height of NIMBYism. Really, it was not it was like an 18-unit building. They were offering to preserve this historic farmhouse that was on the site. There was a lot of good things about that proposed development, but of course the neighborhood was up in arms about that. So I worked really closely with Joni, and she taught me all about the planning process in the City of London. She taught me all about the provincial policy and the provincial policy statement and the Provincial Planning Act that guide and govern municipal planning. And when that was all done and the neighborhood lost their opposition and the developer was granted the rezoning, even though he never did go ahead and build that particular building. But at the end of that whole process, Joni Beckler said to me, I'm not running again. And I want you to think about running in my place. And my initial reaction was, I'm not qualified to do that. I don't know anything about being a municipal politician. And she said, the two hardest parts are the planning process and the budget. So you've got one down. You really know that. You can go ahead with that, and I'll teach you everything I know about the budget. So it actually took her a couple of years. That was really early in her final term. And it took her a couple of years literally to talk me into it. And then here I am today, a graduate of the municipal council in the City of London.
That was perfect training. And it's something that I am encouraging female women candidates to do, to get involved so they can learn how the process works. So you did it perfectly. So,
unknowingly, but perfectly.
And so having said that, Maureen, what are the skills or knowledge that interested candidates should be learning and developing before running an election? I know we touched on this with the experience that you'd have been given, but could you expand a bit?
So at the municipal level, and I'm sure I know that this is adaptable to the other two levels of government as well, but the municipal level, first of all, affects people's lives in a more direct and immediate way than the other two levels of government. The other two levels are bigger, broader policies. What often happens with this current provincial government is they'll set policy that they haven't fully written yet, and they'll enact it into law. This is like this happened with the Planning Act. When they overhauled the Planning Act, the new act was in law, but there were no real regulations that went along with it. So we scrambled and hurried up to get applications approved and through under the old Planning Act, because we had certain tools under the old one that were going to be taken away. So we had about 2 years to really go fast and try to get some of that extra stuff in that we wouldn't be able to do once the new legislation was fully written. But at the municipal level, we can make decisions that will affect your life tomorrow or next week or next month. It's people talk about government moving slowly. I think it's the swiftest form of government. So if somebody's looking to run municipally, you might run, which often happens because you're unhappy with the current council, or there's a specific issue that really fired you up and that is inspiring you to run because, I'm going to make a difference. I think it's really, really important. And this is where Joni Beckler helped me as well so much during the election campaign. You have to find out what the relevant and pressing and burning issues of the day are. So often at the municipal level, your people are not actually paying that much attention. And there isn't a lot of you're not sitting down to watch the national news and hearing what's happening, especially if you're in a smaller community and you don't have a lot of local news coverage. So it's important to follow what's going on at City Council. What are the votes? What are the issues? What are the concerns? So I know at City Council, there's sort of these recurring things that keep coming up. Animal welfare comes up time and again based on whatever's happening. So that Reptilia Zoo for reptiles at the West End Mall that has set themselves up in violation of city bylaws. That's the latest, but during my time on council, we dealt with the animal welfare bylaw, updating it, reviewing it, rules and regulations around how many dogs and cats you can have in your home. So those are the things that keep coming up over and over again, and people should pay attention and learn about those things. We reduced speed limits in neighborhoods throughout the City of London. So, and a lot of these things, just like the Reptilia one, a lot of these bylaws and rules and regulations, as you know, Helen, are tied to what the province allows a municipality to do. So the reason we went ahead and reduced the speed limits in the neighborhoods in the City of London was because the province allowed us finally to do that. before there were some adjustments made to provincial legislation, if a city wanted to make any street different from 50 kilometers an hour, there were very strict rules and regulations on signage. You had to inundate the area with signs. And so if we had wanted to go ahead with that change before the province changed the legislation, it would have cost us millions of dollars in signs to notify people of what the speed limits were. So with changes that actually started with the Wynne government, and then the Ford government followed through with those changes and allowed them to keep going, you can designate a whole neighborhood. So you really only have to put a sign at the start of the neighborhood to let them know you're entering a community safety zone, and that means there's a lowered speed limit. It also means a higher ticket if you get caught speeding in that area. So that really, it reduced the cost for municipalities. So we went ahead and did that. So it's impossible for people really, unless they're super keen, to really know every single thing, exactly how the provincial powers interact with municipal powers. It's impossible to know every single detail that you will learn. You will learn those things during your time on council, but those really pressing issues, the ones that come up time and time again, I think it's important that that's how somebody prepare before they even run, because you're going to get asked at the door. And there were a ton of those issues when I ran for municipal council, and I found myself calling Joni all the time. What can you tell me about? There was a big, huge water reservoir in London that had been started to be built, and there was issues with the design. There was a flaw. There was this, and so it was way behind, and it was over budget. And somebody asked me about that. Luckily, it was in a written survey, so I had the opportunity to call Joni and say, I haven't been following this issue. What's this all about? And it went back years. And Joni had been on council for 14 years. So she had a wealth, and she had a mind like a steel trap. She retained everything and she kept files, paper files too, to remind herself if she needed to. So it was really great to have her as a guide and a counselor and a mentor for sure.
How wonderful that you had a mentor like that.
Yeah, I was so lucky.
I had a question for you, but maybe we don't even need to ask it, but I'll tell you what my question was. But I think you had the ideal. If you could design a candidate support program for yourself or other women, what would it look like? And I feel like you just described that. You had your own mentor.
I did.
Go to who was knowledgeable and had a perfect understanding of how municipal government works.
Yes, she really did.
It does take a while to learn the ins and outs. When I was a counselor, I was very fortunate because I had worked for 8 years as a municipal clerk.
Oh, wow. So you had a lot.
I was familiar with the Municipal Act, et cetera, and the fact that local government is really a creature of the provincial government. Yep. And you can only do what you're allowed to do through legislation.
Absolutely.
So if every candidate could have a mentor like Joni, that would be really wonderful. It gives me an idea that perhaps we can set up some mentorship around that.
I think that's a great idea. The other thing Joni had was a real love of municipal government. Mm-hmm. She never wanted, she was asked many times to run for different parties, and she was asked many times to run for mayor, and she wasn't interested in any of those things because she really liked that direct connection with her constituents, and she felt she would have lost that at other levels of government and even as mayor.
Absolutely, I agree. Possibly not so much at the mayoral level, but there is this thought that the provincial and federal levels are a little sexier and more powerful, et cetera. But really, as you said, and I often say, it's local government that is closest to the voter, to the people. And if you want to make a difference, that's where you can do it.
Absolutely.
At the other levels, you just don't have that same kind of power.
Or it takes longer.
It definitely takes longer. So here's a little more personal question. What is the one thing in your life that you are happy you did? It doesn't have to be politics.
Well, there's actually a few, having my children, 100%.
Oh, you had children. Tell
Yeah,
us about
yeah.
that.
I have 3 children for sure. So yeah, that I spent 8 years just before running for city council. The reason as well that it was so easy for me to run is the 8 years prior to running, I was a stay-at-home mom. So yeah, my youngest was 7, about to turn 8 when I got elected. So it was a good time. She was old enough that she didn't need such intense care anymore. And my husband worked from home. So that was good as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that, yes, no regrets, and no regrets at all running for city council either. It was not, as you know, Helen, it's not a common thing to do. Like, I don't know what the percentage of the population that run for office and win and take office, but it is a mind-blowing thing. And I always took the position that it was public service. This was not, as much as I got so much out of it, I wanted to run because I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to help in my community. And there are a lot of ways to help in your community, but I really have always been interested in politics. I never thought I would be a politician. I was always interested in policy, and in different jobs where I worked, I had to know and understand and talk about policy. And that was always interesting to me. So I guess I always thought if I was involved in government, it would be behind the scenes. But
what did you do in prior life before you stayed home with your children?
So immediately before staying home with my children, I worked for Green Shield Canada, and I worked in different roles, starting out as an administrative clerk, and then working my way up to a sales executive position. So with health and Green Shield Canada only does health and dental benefits. They don't do the life and the LTD and those kinds of things. So that was my first real. Well, no, not really. I was going to say interactions with in a presentation performance sort of way, the way that city council is. But I did some of that with previous jobs as well. But where I really did do a lot of work understanding policy and then having to explain it was I worked on an information line in my 20s for the LCBO. And people they don't have this line anymore, but it was called the LCBO info line. And I just sat in a room with 4 guys, and we answered phones all day and answered questions from the public. We had to be bilingual, so we sometimes got questions in French, and it was just all about simple stuff like, where can I buy this bottle of wine, or where's my nearest liquor store, to explaining the liquor laws in the province to people that had questions.
So it sounds like you had a lot. Those were very transferable skills that would take you into a life in politics.
Yes.
I think that's important for women to know. Because they will say, well, I don't have any experience. I could never do that. I don't know enough.
Yeah.
But and one of the things I hope to do is encourage women to look at their life and what they've done and look at those skills that are for sure transferable.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate. Here's another question for you. I mentioned to you before we started recording that the Jean Collective is named after Jean McDougall, who was my best friend, my mentor, and became my mother when I was on council. So obviously, I really looked up to her, respected her, and she inspired me. What would be one person in your life that did that for you?
My mom, for sure, my mom.
You know, I wondered if you would say that before we got on this Zoom call. I was looking you up and I saw the obituary, and I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
I got to write and deliver her eulogy when she passed away. So that was, I was really proud to do that.
well, what a wonderful legacy she has left with you and all of your siblings. How many are there? 7, maybe?
Oh, no.
Not that many?
There were 14 of us. There were 14. Yeah, my youngest brother died, sadly, at age 15. And then I think she has 48 grandchildren, and I forget how many great-grandchildren. A
And
lot.
they're all like you and Will. They're just making the life just such a fun place. And I'm sure that's true. So I'm trying to decide if there's 2 things I want to ask. What legacy do you hope to leave, and how do you want to be remembered by those who have worked with you?
Whatever, my go-to answer to that is actually something that Joni used to say, and I 100% believe in this and feel the same way. And I hope to leave the world a better place. And I think that's the least that we can all ask for. And it can be the smallest thing, from planting a garden to going on to do, amazing, bold, great things. That we all have our own talents and our own gifts to share. And then we all have different resources. Some have great resources, and that allows them to do great things, but even do small things in a great way.
So that brings to mind what's often said is it's not about you, it's about everyone else, about the community. And that seems like, to me, that seems like a good way to remember that is if a person continually thinks about it as it's all about me,
Yeah.
then they're not going to be able to make that difference. They need to think about what does the world need, and how can I help to deliver that? Would that be a safe thing to say?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you could give one piece of advice to a woman who is struggling with self-confidence, what would that be? And I'll tell you why I ask, because I've been building this since I started in 2019. And so often I hear, as I mentioned earlier, that women just think they can't do it.
Absolutely.
They can't, they don't know enough, etc. So what would you say to a woman who is struggling with self-confidence?
Yeah, it's that imposter syndrome, right? We all suffer from it. I would say that, especially once I joined City Council, I was asked to do things, and people may have been the same on your City Council, but you got invited to things, you got tapped on the shoulder sometimes, will you do this? And nobody stops to look at your resume. They just say, hey, Helen, you're a city councillor and we need somebody to do this from City Council. Will you do it? And when I got asked to do things that scared the crap out of me, but I did them anyway.
Yes.
Those really scary things, I don't ever remember failing. And I always remember being so scared through it all, getting it done. But I remember being so proud and feeling like I had accomplished so much. And every single time you do that and succeed, it builds your confidence like exponentially. It's not even just a little bit. And you look back and you say, wow, I did that. Don't hesitate to do things just because they're scary.
I love that. You're right. You're right. I think that's a lesson that both of us have learned. And I can remember, although it's a while back now, when I first got on council and chairing different committees and things. And you're right. No one looks at your resume. It's just, okay, you're elected.
And
you do it.
You do it. And there's so many, that's right. And there are so many people along the way that want to help. So the first time I chaired a committee, like literally right out of the gate, I'm chairing a committee, and the deputy city clerk, Linda Rowe, supported me in that committee. And she was a godsend. She just led me through the whole process for the first few bunch of meetings, never made me feel stupid, always just there to support me and advise me. And, people like that, there are so many people like Linda Rowe. Linda Rowe is exceptional. She's retired now, but there are so many people like that along the way that are just so willing to help. The city manager in St. Thomas right now is Sandra Daters-Beer, who worked for many years at the City of London. She was a deputy city manager by the time she left the City of London. But she was the same sort of thing. So she reported into another committee that I chaired. She was always, when I got asked to be the co-chair of the Mayor's Advisory Panel on Poverty. Again, I was terrified. I felt, what do I know about this and what these people are going through? How can I be the co-chair of this? And Sandra was one of the staff supports that supported that panel. Same thing, just Lynn Livingston, who's the current city manager at the City of London. She was the lead staff support. Those two women just throughout my time on council, just made things so much easier for me, pointed me in the right direction, gave me advice and help when I needed it. There's so many people that will help you and are there to help you along the way. And count on them, lean on them.
I love that also. And that's what this is all about. You've mentioned two women who supported you and carried you and encouraged you and taught you when needed. And really, that's what we're trying to do with the Jean Collective, a Woman in Politics initiative. We're to support, carry, encourage, motivate each other. And one of those women you mentioned, the CEO of the City of St. Thomas, I have heard great things about her because I'm working with a group of Middlesex County women politicians, and we're creating a leadership conference.
Yes, I'm already signed up for it.
You did?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. So they've had, I forget who it was, but one of them, it doesn't matter, had really great things to say about her. So I do want to connect with her at some point. So you've had so many gems for us today and some great knowledge that you've passed on. And I hope that it will encourage other women to look at this, to not be afraid, to realize that it is the common, everyday person, woman, who can run for council and to really make a difference locally.
Yeah.
So before we end, do you have any last words for our audience?
So I think what you're doing is so great, Helen, and it's so important. I've been involved over the years through Brescia and Kings have a program called Women in Civic Leadership. I think they've changed the name slightly now, but it used to be just a small little informal mentorship program that Joni Beckler did with a prof at King's, Alison Larkin, and it's sort of morphed into this bigger thing. And it's all about matching up students with different, not just political leaders, but different leaders in and around the City of London. And sort of every time I was involved with that program, there were so many of those students that said the same thing. I was really interested in federal politics, or I didn't think municipal politics was very sexy or anything like that. And by the end of the course, many of them were reconsidering that opinion. They now looked at the municipal level as a very important level of government. Ariel Campaga was one of those students that went through that program, and now she's a federal member of parliament. There was another young woman who went through that program that ended up on city council. outside of London in one of the counties. Maybe it was Woodstock or something around there, maybe outside of Woodstock. But there have been students that have come through that program and decided to run for office at different levels. So I think your program, what you're doing, that program that I was involved in with Brescia and Kings, those are the kinds of things we need. There's an organization called Equal Voice that does sort of the same kind of thing. They actually had lobbied for legislation out east in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia. I think it's New Brunswick, where the vote subsidization that the political parties get for each vote. They get a certain, like $1.25 or something like that. In New Brunswick, provincial legislation just changed, so they get more money for votes for female candidates. So I think it's $1.25 for any candidate, for a male candidate, and $1.50 for a female candidate. And it's incentive not just to get female candidates, but to put them in winnable ridings, because the more votes they get for a female candidate, the more money they get to put in their coffers. So that's what Equal Voice, I know, helped to craft that legislation and really lobby hard for it. We need to see more and more and more of that.
So how I started was in 2018 when I saw what I thought were the dismal results in Lambton County of 20%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The next March, I attended an Equal Voice campaign school in Ottawa.
There you go.
And even though their focus is more federal,
yeah,
not much local, but it did inspire me to come home. I came away from that conference, that weekend conference, and I said, I know I can do this.
Yeah.
And it was Equal Voice that inspired me.
That's great.
So I am a member.
Okay.
And I do, I follow everything they do and of course support them. So, but my focus is I want to see more women in local government. So
absolutely.
I thank you for today. And it's such a pleasure to meet you sort of in person.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Me too. Thanks so much, Helen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Maureen. You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.